Hi everyone, welcome to Lisa's Stamp Studio. My name is Lisa Curcio. Today's card is going to teach you a couple techniques. We're going to create a template and we're going to do some sponging to create a beautiful sunset on this card. I'm using a brand new stamp set called Lilypad Lake, and it's offered as a bundle with the framelits and the stamp set, or you can buy them separately. If you're here from YouTube, you'll be able to access the pictures, the cutting dimensions, and the supplies over on my blog. I've placed the link right down in the description of this video below, making it easy for you to navigate. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's start on today's project. Here's a good close-up of that card we're going to be creating today. Isn't this sharp? And really quite easy to do. The very first thing we're going to do is I'm going to teach you how to make the stencil for this circle. I've got my Big Shot magnetic platform. I'm a fan of that when I'm using the framelits because I just find that they hold in place a lot better. I'm going to put a clear cutting mat on the bottom to protect that. And this is just a cheap piece of cardstock. I bought this, I think, in like the dollar store or one of the big box stores. You're looking for a paper that's fairly thin but strong enough to hold up to using your daubers over it. You can even use a scrap piece of cardstock if you'd like. I'm going to center this circle in the middle of this template the best that I can. And then I'm going to put a clear mat over the top, and then we're going to run this through the Big Shot. This is the stencil we just created, and this is a piece of thick Whisper White cardstock. Remember, if you're here visiting from YouTube, you'll find the link to my blog down below where you can find pictures and cutting dimensions of everything that I'm creating today, as well as a complete supply list. So I'm just lining these two pieces up together, and I will tell you that you can use a piece of washi tape here. I'm going to use a Post-it note to hold them down onto your work surface. You should make sure that you're working on a protected surface in case you get ink outside the perimeter of that card base. So I'm just going to anchor this down just a little bit. And the first color I'm going to use is So Saffron, and this is the old style ink pad. You know, the new ones were just introduced on June 1st. I have a dauber, and this one's labeled for my So Saffron, so I do have a separate dauber for each color. I find that when I ink it up in here, it's quite strong, so I like to tap off on my grid paper just to make sure that the ink consistency is not too vibrant to begin with. I'm going to use my fingers as well to anchor this down, and I'm going to concentrate on the halfway point or the horizon point on this card. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to work in a little bit of color. The saffron is going to be the lightest color, and that's going to be concentrated mostly at the bottom. You can also see that I'm rubbing back and forth. What I'm trying to do is to avoid those circles that the dauber can make because of the shape of it. So I'm just going to work around here. And I'm going to switch over now to the brand new Mingo Medley. These are going to open just like a makeup compact case. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this back to lock it in place. And I have a separate dauber for this one as well. Same thing. I'm going to ink this up and I'm going to tap off. I want to make sure that it's not too strong. And I'm going to work mostly on the outside edges. No two of these cards are going to look alike. So this one I'm going to guarantee is going to look different than the one I just showed you before we started. And all you're going to do is the same thing. You're rubbing back and forth, trying not to pounce to get shading in this area. So you can see that I'm going over the top half of this because I want the ink stronger there. Keep in mind too, for whatever reason, when you go to move this stencil, the one that we created with the opening, it's going to look a little darker than it does right now. Now to close these, you're going to push from the back. It's going to release it, give you a little bit more to grab onto here, and then snap that shut just like a compact again. And the next one is Balmy Breeze. This is going to make up the water portion of that circle, and again, a separate dauber. Now I want to be really careful that I don't tap inside an area I already have color because it can pick up the pigmentation. So I'm going to work over here at the top, holding my hands here in place. I'm going to ink this up, and I'm going to tap off to make sure it's not too strong. And this time I'm going to do the same thing, but on the lower portion to represent the water. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth and back and forth. And you can see that this is such a beautiful blue color, but it can be quite strong. So I want to make sure that I don't make it too dark. And any shading you have in the center really just is reminiscent of waves. And we're going to do some stamping on this as well. And I'm going to blend up just a little bit into that yellow, working down here to make sure that I've got my circle well traced out, and a little bit more depth here at the bottom. And that's good. It doesn't have to be entirely filled or perfect. Now we're ready for the stamp. I'm going to leave it masked, and I'm grabbing the wave image that's inside this stamp set. And the stamp set is called Lilypad Lake. Now, I will tell you at first glance, I was like, do I like it? Do I not like it? But you know what? I beyond like it. I love it. I have found this extremely versatile, and you're going to find lots of samples with the stamp set in the upcoming weeks and months ahead as we travel through this brand new catalog. You're going to find that stamp set here in the brand new catalog. This is on page 133 here at the top. There's some beautiful samples as well on these pages. If you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and you're interested in the samples and the catalog as well as purchasing products, I would be more than happy to send you a complimentary copy. Just leave me a comment below. Now, because this is sponged and this is actually going to be ink, you're going to find that there's a graduation difference in the color. So that's why this is going to work really well. You can see it's a very large stamp, so you're going to have to travel across your ink pad, or you can leave it face up on your work surface, hold it in the grooves here on the side, and then go ahead and ink up your ink pad. This will ensure that you don't miss an area of that nice long image. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place this here as close to that horizon line as I can. I'm going to press. I'm going to make sure that I'm pressing along that circle cutout because I really don't want there to be too much of a skip line. Now you're going to see we have a little bit more room to fill here, so I'm going to do the exact same thing, inking it back up. And then this time I'm going to come up underneath it. I am not too worried that I might have a separation in those waves or even if they overlap. I'm going back to the Mango ink and I'm pulling out this circle from the stamp set. And I'm going to go ahead and ink that up. And I'm going to stamp that right here inside the sky. Now, when I first did it, I wasn't sure whether I liked it or not, but I'll tell you what, we're going to add some Winkostella to that. That's going to really bring out that hue. I'm going to go ahead and remove my Post-it notes. And then I'll remove the mask. Now you can save this and you can use it again. So keep it with your stamp set. And that's left us with this really beautiful sunrise. Now I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to bring in a separate piece of thick Whisper White cardstock. And this is where we're going to stamp that heron image. So I'm going to go ahead and ink that up as well. And since I'm going to be using a little bit of Stampin' Blends, it has to be Memento ink. And I highly recommend thick Whisper White cardstock. Now there's a die for this that's going to cut this out, so that little bit of oops I have right here I'm not too worried about. Here's a tip for you. When you go to ink up your images, always check, because if I wasn't die cutting this, I certainly wouldn't want that there. So always check it, and you can always take a tissue or a Q-tip or even your finger in my case and just wipe this off. This is a water-based ink which will work beautifully with the alcohol-based markers. I'm going to add a little bit of color to him so he's not completely white, and I've chosen to bring out the light Smoky Slate Stampin' Blends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the chiseled end and I'm going to add just a little bit of color in some areas. So I'm going to come up underneath and you're going to see that I'm actually flicking color on that paper from the outside, pulling it in. That'll allow me just to provide a little bit of shading without too much color. I find too by turning my cardstock and not turning my hand, it's going to make it a lot easier. And then I'm going to add a little bit up here into the wing area as well. And then down here in the tail, I'm going to add a little bit of shading. And if this is too light for you, I'm going to give you a tip on how to use the color lifter. So I'm going to go ahead and cap that. That snap ensures that you don't have to worry about any alcohol releasing. And now I'm going to use the color lifter, better known as what I call the color mover. So not only will it lighten the color, but will also help move the ink. You can see here too, I've got a small area of color right outside the line. So I'm going to turn this to make it easy for my hand. And I'm actually going to scribble this far enough away from that image so that that wet spot, which is the alcohol, is going to penetrate and move towards that image and help erase, actually remove that mistake. Now I'm going to come over this area as well, and I'm going to add little circles here just to kind of lighten up this color a little bit, so this will tend to look a little bit more shaded. Remember, it's going to take about 6 to 7 seconds for that alcohol to process so that you can determine whether or not that shading is sufficient to your liking. So be patient. And I'm going to come back over here. You can see where we started now. It's already come out a little bit lighter. But this will add a little bit of color to our image without it being so stark white, especially on a white background. So I'm going to give them a little bit more shadow here inside and then a little bit down here in the legs. I'll just kind of lighten that up a little bit. Now that looks good. Now let's grab the framelits and let's die cut this. I've got the Lakeside framelits here that actually die cut all the images in this stamp set. I'm going to go ahead and remove this one. That is the heron image. The great thing about the magnetic platform is it's going to help hold these dies in place as you die cut them. So I'm going to actually lay my clear mat down to protect it. And then I've got my image here, and that little oops is not going to show in a second. And then I'm going to lay this over the top. Now if you find that your framelit is slipping, that's probably because there is a curvature inside your clear mats. You can see there's a little bit of one going on here. So it's important that you switch these around. So what's been on the top is then on the bottom, and then vice versa. And don't be afraid also to put the front to the back and the back to the front. And I do flip them both ways. So I try to get even wear so that the contact between the die and the platform is maintained. And then another clear mat over the top. And then we're going to go ahead and crank this through. This is where you gotta love bundles. This stamp set is sold as a bundle for a 10% savings, which means you'd get both the dies and the stamp set together. So there we go, we've got our image. Next step is I'm going to adhere this to a piece of balmy blue cardstock. So that's going to get bordered here on the front of this panel, leaving a small margin of color all the way around. And I'm going to add a greeting down here at the bottom, going back to my Memento ink, and I've pulled out the smaller greeting that says, "Be calm and leave it to God." So I'm going to ink that up, checking to make sure I don't have my edges. I made that mistake once before. And this is going to go down here at the bottom. I've got another piece of Whisper White here. This is actually the card base. This finished card is going to be 4 inches by 8 inches. These smaller cards are really lots of fun. I'm going to challenge you to give those a try. I'm using that bone folder for that nice crisp edge on the base of that card. And then this panel is going to get mounted here. And I chose to use adhesive. Of course, you can use dimensionals if you'd like. And then I'm going to center that right here on the front panel of the card base, leaving that small border of white all the way around. And then I like to flip and rub from the back in case I've got ink on my hands. Boy, I'm notorious for that. And then remember this beautiful image? Well, we're going to flip that over, and this is where our mini dimensionals are going to be our best friend. So I'm going to actually pull those off, and you're going to find that they fit really well on these smaller images, especially when there's a lot of shapes and curves involved, just like there is on this one. Now let's talk a little bit too about what we're going to do to anchor down those more narrow areas here. I'm going to bring in my silicone craft sheet just so that you can see this a little bit better. What I like to do is I like to take a pair of scissors and I like to cut up my mini dimensionals right while they're still on the paper. That's going to make them a lot smaller so that I can get those in those little tight areas. So I'm going to go ahead and use my paper piercing tool to help me lift those off. Looks like I got 2 of them there. And then I'm going to stick one up here on his head. And that other one I'm going to add right down here inside the curve of his neck. And then down here at the feet, let's get a couple of these in here. Now it might be a little bit too big. And we'll give that a haircut from the front, and I'll show you about that in just a second. So let me grab my other one and place that one here. What you don't want is you don't want your dimensional visible from the front. So I'm going to flip that over, and I'm looking, and I'm like, nope, that's good. We can't see any dimensional. If you did, go ahead and take your scissors and snip it. So we've got our card base. We're going to take off that paper backing. And then this will get mounted here. I'm going to make sure that his tail doesn't extend past the base of my card, and then I'll press him in place. And my last step is going to be the clear wink of Stella, just to give that, that sun some real nice pizzazz. So I'm just going to work that in here. This has an alcohol base to it, so it will dry very, very quickly. And if you want even more shimmer, you can go ahead and let it dry a little bit, and then you can add another coat. Now I know this is going to be near impossible to pick up that pretty shimmer. So here's the card we created today. and the one I created before you joined me. You can see the difference here, totally. I added a little bit extra ink in this area here, which was a great place for my son, and then not so much here. Remember to like and share the video. If you're not already subscribing to my YouTube channel, I'd love to encourage you to do so that you'll receive notifications of when I'm live here on YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to my blog for the pictures and cutting dimensions, and while you're there, subscribe to my newsletter. I provide a free tutorial every week that's not shared on my other platforms. Would sure love to have you join us, and it's absolutely free. Thanks so much for joining me, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.